welcome back. This car is something very nostalgic for me, and I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity to walk around it, look at it all, take it all in, and feel 20 years younger. So let me introduce you to the legend of Woo. Before we get into it, please consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to get notifications. Backstory of this car. I remember this car when I was early 20s, probably 2021. It was a local car to me, still is thankfully. DVD came out called, I think we call it Full Throttle, and it was done by Jeremy Clarkson. Kind of the theme of the DVD was modified cars versus basically off-the-shelf factory performance cars. And this thing demolished everything. So when the DVD came out, I was just getting into the performance cars and modifying scene. As you do, me and the boys all got the DVD, sat around watching it, enjoying it. I remember, never forget it, I took my black Corsa for a body kit and painting. It was a local garage, local to me, and not 100 yards in a back garden surrounded by bushes was Woo. And I didn't believe it. Went over, had a look, had a walk round, and it was the actual car from the DVD. Was sat in a sorry state in a back garden. And from then, I would tell my friends that Woo from the DVD is only around the corner, and they wouldn't believe me. And we would go out for a drive, and I'd take them to the back garden and point to them. And we would get a reference shot of the reg plate, and we would correspond to prove to people that this was the car. So that's a bit of an introduction of my nostalgic. To say this was the king of the streets back in the early 2000s is an understatement. So let me get the camera, let's have a walk round, and let me show you what makes this car so special. So obviously it's a Ford Capri. And you know what's amazing just to make me smile is, I can remember the registration plate off by heart, no matter where I am, because it was, like I say, it was such an iconic car. And as when I say it was king of the streets, this car used to go down to York Dragway most weekends and take home awards for the fastest street car there.
Well, Pete Kennedy very quick with that Capri. Look out some changes here. He's the number 2 man.
And even in today's standards, this car would run a low 11s. Now, on a low 11 car back in early 2000s, as you can imagine, it was phenomenally fast. And even nowadays, you've still got to make 500-600 horsepower to even get down in them numbers. But this thing was a combination of power, it was nitrous controlled, it had all the old school technology, but it all worked in a Capri shell. It's obviously four-wheel drive, YB Cosworth powered. I would have thought, again, we're still looking into the information about it. It is, I think, a T34, maybe 38 turbo. So the car made around 450 horsepower, which again, isn't massive amounts of numbers, but then it would have a 100 shot of nitrous on top. And I'll tell you the story about the max power introduction to this car, because there was a very nice article at one point from Max Power explaining this car and that it absolutely demolished him. And it was, I think the editor was called Millsy, and it was his first experience of a nitrous powered car. Well, let's open the bonnet, give you a bit of a look in under there, and we'll talk about a bit more of the backstory of this car, because I'm super excited to get into it. you go back to the DVD, which I think, you know, symbolises this car for all of us, where a lot of people who've never seen the car in person or doesn't know Rusty personally, you know, everyone can go back to that. It was, I think the original video in the DVD was the Capri versus a Monaro. The Capri one, but the one that everyone remembers was at the end credit scene, and it was the Capri versus a Brabus Merc. And Clarkson's exact words were, this is a £25,000 Capri versus a £250,000 Brabus. And the Capri left it for dead. So to go back, like I say, that long ago, the performance on this thing, like keep saying it, even today, is fantastic. So as you can see, YB powered, 4-wheel drive. To describe a little bit about the conversion, if you look at the seam sealer edge here, these are original Sierra Cosworth inner arches. He had to graft in the inner arches into the car. And to say this was done, like I say, 20 years ago, it looks absolutely beautiful and factory. You would never know that the inner arches have been modified. Now to look at the back, again, people who know the Fords, this is part of the Sierra. But again, if you look close, let's try and get under. It looks so factory done. The workmanship is absolutely brilliant on this car. To look from a distance, you would never know the 4-wheel drive swap's been done. So to show the detail, again, as I've showed with the inner chassis legs, that Rusty went to make this car near perfect, that you couldn't tell that it was adapted. Even little things like all factory braces put in for the vents. You know, it's the little details. And when you look back to early 2000s, where there wasn't a mass amount of people doing this type of thing. It has been fully restored. And what's a really nice touch of this car, which I'd like to touch on, is the car was built by a gentleman called Rusty. Everyone in our area knows him as Rusty. His name was Peter. He built this car to go drag racing. Obviously, he did his drag racing, and then for some reason, we don't know why, it was parked up in his back garden since. But then it was sold to one of his close friends, and then his close friend paid Rusty to start restoring it. So the car has been probably, other than the bodywork, I'm hearing that the restoration work has been done by the original builder. So that's a really nice touch, because unfortunately, Rusty passed away, and now it's down to his friends to keeping this dream alive. So it's a really nice touch of a really nice centre plate. So yeah, we've lost Rusty, but the car will always live on. And what I do like is the fact that I posted a picture on my social medias of this car, and people from all over the UK knew exactly what this car was, which just shows you how much of an influence the DVD had to the modified car scene, how much influence the car stood out. Certainly shows that it's left his little piece in history. So to try and get, you know, some little bit more details about the car, all custom, you know, nice little dressing plates, especially everything's been nicely engraved with 4x4 Cosworth. I don't think I've seen many 4x4 Cosworth Capris out there, but this is definitely the most renowned and well-known that I've researched and found. And again, to go back to early 2000s, there was no fancy ECUs, there were no massive injectors, there were no like aftermarket brand of turbos like Precision. They were all kind of, you had to make do with what was around, which makes this so much more special, because you had to make do with what you had. And again, 450 horsepower back in early, you know, 2000 was, you know, it was a big number. And even today, a 450 horsepower Golf R, that type of thing, still is a quick car. So imagine being king of the streets back in early 2000, being able to pull up against most things and being able to pull away from it. the old school touches, old factory radio. It's just beautiful. The paintwork is like glass. It is stunning. And like I say, it's so nice that friends of Rusty have now taken ownership of the car and are keeping it restored, looked after, maintained to what it was back in the day. Because I do feel probably at some point Rusty, I wouldn't say fell out with it. I think again it goes back to what I discussed previously about projects, and that you do get to the point where you just put them aside and move on. And for this to be sat in Rusty's garden for probably the best part of 10 years, it shows he did have a bit of attachment for it, but it was nice that before he passed away, he had the opportunity to restore the thing and see it kind of running again. So let's have a look inside. The nice little tags on the sills. You know, for me, it just makes me smile that after all these years, I've been able to see, you know, even just sitting the legend of Woo. Brilliant car. Again, I'm not sure if these are factory clocks, but the clocks go to 170 mile an hour, and I'm quite confident this thing would probably do 170 mile an hour. And then these little stories that also follow this car around, that the story of, again, going to the cruise and the Max Power lads coming up. I think it was an M3 on the motorway. They pulled up alongside Rusty. They actually state in the article that he had a fag sticking out of his mouth. They tried to race him and Rusty left them for dead. The other story I've heard, going for the recording of the DVD with Jeremy Clarkson, Rusty was that hungover from the night before, he was asleep in the back of the car all the way there. And Lee, who's now the owner, had to drive it to the filming. So there's so many stories, so much character of this legendary car. So due to the timing, we're not able to go out for a drive because the owner is, I think he's in work at the moment, and his friends kindly let me come to his garage and film this car during the day. But in the future, it will be a bit of a childhood dream of mine to just get out in it and to see what it's like. I don't care if it's the slowest thing on the planet, to be honest. Just the fact of, it was a big inspiration when I was going through the modifying car scene. And to fight, like I say earlier, to finally stand in front of it, to be able to get close to it, to sit in it, and to see it restored to its glory has been brilliant. And I really look forward to the lads, the group in the area of the Ford fanatics, carry on and take care of this car, and it kind of stays in the area of the lads who knew Rusty and are all friends and can all talk about the stories. And another thing to bring up, Rusty's funeral was, I think, the back end of October of 2020. And on that day, the lads rallied together to get the car finished so they could take it to his funeral. And on that day, I've seen probably 50 modified cars, if not more, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, so many Fords, because that's what Rusty was obviously known for. They all went to the funeral, they all met up on the local car meet area, had a good chinwag, had a catch up, talked about old school stories, and then did a drive-by past Rusty's house and his old workshop. Of the car people that, you know, bring us all together, and it's nice that, like I say, the torch is still alight for Rusty and the car has been put back into its perfect condition. So I'm going to sign this one off. It's been a really nice experience. I've smiled from ear to ear through this one because this has been such kind of an influence to me in the early days. There's so much I could talk about this on this car. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one.